Hi guys, Micah Fights with Friends. I've been wanting to do this subject for a while. For one thing, because it's very intriguing to me, but I've seen it come up again and again more recently on MMA forums and websites, and that's how would Bruce Lee have done in the UFC? Would he be a champion? Would he be in this undefeatable god, or would did he have the skills to compete? Uh, and a lot of people come forth with a lot of different facts that make a good case, make a good case for both sides. I'm going to tell you, like a lot of people, I got into MMA because of Bruce Lee. I watched Enter the Dragon, I want to say in like the fourth grade, and me and my friend rented it on VHS. We literally watched it 5 times back to back consecutively. And I was hooked from that moment. It's like, find me more of this. So we've all idolized him. Most people that are into MMA have idolized Bruce Lee for quite a while. He has become a mystical figure. That being said, when I was growing up, I also owned all of his combat books. He made 4 different books on training, and I would encourage you to look those up. They were paperbacks. They're in different colors. They're like in bright colors. You should be able to find them on eBay. The point is, Bruce Lee was not just a striker. I hear a lot of people talking about recently about, oh, he was just a movie star and he wasn't really a fighter. He would not have been able to compete with the guys that were in the UFC today. Ask Chuck Norris about that. Now, Chuck Norris was the real deal. If you didn't know, Chuck Norris was a 6-time karate world champion. He was the best karate fighter on earth when Bruce and Chuck Norris decided to do Enter the Dragon. Or, excuse me, Return of the Dragon. This was before Enter the Dragon. This was early 1970s. And Chuck Norris had beefed up for the role because he wanted to look like this, really big guy. And there's this conception that Bruce Lee was, only stood around 130 pounds. He was very lean and muscular. So that's probably a lot of the reason why that comes out. When Chuck showed up, he said he had to beef up more. He had to go way above his karate weight. He said that Bruce Lee was about 185 most likely. So 5'9", 185. Of course, that's not cut weight. That's probably not fight weight. If he were to fight, imagine he would be in one of these no man's land weights. Probably ideal fighting weight around 162. So he'd be good for that 165-pound weight class. But would it have been great to see him at 170 against some of these strikers like Tyrone Woodley, Darren Till, Stephen Thompson. People talk about his supposed weakness in wrestling, and a lot of the demonstrations he did were for self-defense. So what he did was he felt in a street fight, if you were attacked by several assailants, and he's 100% correct like that on this, that you don't want to take people down, you don't want to do jiu-jitsu. Most of the champions in the UFC right now are wrestlers, and they have, good jiu-jitsu ground game. When you're attacked by, say, 4 or 5 assailants, which Bruce Lee was constantly doing scenarios for, he almost seemed obsessed with it, like people were chasing him, that it's not a good strategy. Not a good strategy at all. That's why, my friend, if you go on the interview that I did just yesterday with the CEO of International Fighters League, where they talk about it's going to be 3-on-3 in a cage, 6 men in a cage at a time. There's no grappling. There's basically, it's going to be a striking thing. There's no locks. He said no chokes, no locks, which basically means no submissions, because it's stupid. You cannot get down on your back. You can't take somebody down and have your head exposed. And Bruce Lee didn't train, obviously, for a fight within the MMA rules. Uh, on the street, you can kick the head of a downed opponent. Just that rule made Pride a whole different game. And we're starting to see Japanese MMA come back, and I think we're going to see more of that. But to get back to the point, if Bruce Lee could have been a UFC champion, I would quote Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson said, if this was around when I was in my prime, he said, I would have definitely did it. And they said, would you have been a champion? And he said, you don't understand. He said, you would have to train me first. This was the guy that was thought to be the baddest man on the planet. He realizes that he would have holes in his game to fill. He would need to at least get a good takedown defense like a Chuck Liddell. Bruce Lee had that. Bruce Lee trained with wrestlers. Bruce Lee trained with all kinds of fighters. He trained with jiu-jitsu guys. He trained with, he was a consummate trainer. Now imagine if you would have put him, there would probably be no UFC without him. Definitely not as early as it was. I mean, Enter the Dragon was UFC. If you haven't seen the movie, it's one of the greatest martial arts movies of all time. Make sure you remedy that right now. I mean, it's fighters from all around the world that come to this island to fight against each other. Style versus style. And it was the premise, basically, Art Davie used to make the UFC. It's what manifested the idea. So to think that Bruce Lee couldn't compete in the UFC, I think is absolutely silly. But if you get him to start training with some of these guys right now, I mean, you think Connor's precise in his striking. Bruce Lee was obsessively precise. He had those short punches. People think now, there's a lot of people that came after him with a lot of kind of, I would say, voodoo MMA, fighting different things. And they say, oh, this one punch, this three punch thing, these things aren't true. His side kicks, if he decided to throw side kicks to the knees, he would probably blow your damn knee out. And that 1 3-inch punch, he did plenty of demonstrations that it was real. And lots of people talk about, well, Bruce Lee wasn't really a fighter. Well, when push came to shove, he challenged anybody. He would go into a dojo. He went in San Francisco with the dojo, thousands of spectators to show off his sport, and said basically, does anybody want to take me on for a challenge? He ended up fighting Jack One Man, as a lot of people probably know, because they did not want him teaching martial arts to non-Asians. They sent Jack One Man over to the dojo for the challenge, and they thought that John Walk Man was going to teach him a lesson, probably paralyze him or kill him. That was the idea going in, and Bruce Lee absolutely destroyed him. Despite whatever you see in the media, this new Bruce Lee movie, there's a little bit of an attempt to rewrite history there. But yes, Bruce Lee was cocky. He was brash. He was, in that way, he was like Connor. He would get into people's minds, I believe. If he was in the UFC, I think he would definitely get into people's minds and play a mental game that they would definitely have doubt in themselves before they got into the cage. And this is a guy that he was writing scripts for fights at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he would knock on a producer's door. Hey, I got this. I'm excited. He was training with Steve McQueen. He was training, though, also with Chuck Norris. He was the trainer to the stars. he was constantly designing these things and sketches and scenarios, absolutely obsessive. This was this guy's complete life. He was, at least in modern day, at least, 20th century and beyond, he was the first mixed martial artist. Absolutely. And Jeet Kune Do, called Way of the Intercepting Fist, was a style he came out with, and he always called it the way with no way. He said, take what style you want, take what you want of each style, take what is useful, leave what is useless. He wasn't a big fan of katas. He wasn't a big fan of some of the ceremony and everything, which really upset a lot of the the Asian culture and the MMA culture at the time, because they were very much about the show, the showmanship of martial arts. And Bruce Lee was a showman, but he wanted to do it his way, and he did it with lightning fast punches, kicks. I don't think there's anybody with the reflexes that he had out there. He was extremely gifted. His reach, I don't know what his reach actually was, but his reach for his height would have made him one of the most difficult fighters to get inside on in the MMA. Would he have gotten a takedown defense, or could he have defended wrestlers? Easily. He would have figured it out. He would have became obsessed with it, and I believe he would have became a UFC champion. So people ask me, would Bruce Lee be a UFC champion in current days? I would say yes, but he would have to train with, these current systems. And he would have added a lot to a camp, to anybody's camp. But you put him around a bunch of like-minded individuals, it would have been scary, I think. I think he would have possibly dominated. The way Khabib's 25-0 dominates with his wrestling, I could see Bruce Lee dominating like that with his striking, and adding a lot of tools along the way as he worked with all these new systems. He didn't have anyone to work with really at the time. He had Kung Fu people, and that was his base. He had Kung Fu people to work with. But he understood that Kung Fu was limited, that Kung Fu wasn't fighting. And that's what upset a lot of people. He's like, Kung Fu is Kung Fu, but it's not everything. It's not utilizing your entire body. And that was the entire idea behind his MMA philosophy. So I want to know what you guys think down there below, though. Let me know down there in the comments. Would Bruce Lee have been a champion in the UFC? If not, how do you think he would have done? Do you think that he would have been this figure that we think he was? And what weight class do you see him fighting in? Who would you have wanted to see him fight? And who do you think would have gave him a tough matchup? Leave your comments down there below. If you're new here, please definitely subscribe to be notified when I go live and post new videos. As always, I love you, I respect you, and I'll see your fine asses later.